This is the second year we've fielded this Global Brand Simplicity Index. And this one, as did the last one, has some very important findings for anyone managing, launching, trying to grow products, services, or brands around the world. And what we did was explore with consumers what brands and what categories were making their lives more complex, or making them simpler. And then we went further and said, you know, how much would you pay for simpler experiences from these brands or others, or if you would pay at all? And what we found was that people will indeed pay for brand experiences, for products, for services, for relationships that are simpler to understand, that are more direct, and are easy to understand what you're going to get. We found what we call a simplicity premium. In the United States, in Germany, in the United Kingdom, across many, many product categories, we found that consumers will pay anywhere from 2.5 to 5.5, 6% more for products or services or brands that they deem simpler to engage with. The median was about 4% more. In the Mideast and China, the median was 6%. In India, people will pay 7% more for brands, products, services that they deem simpler to deal with. So the other thing we wanted to do was see what happens in the capital markets. So we put together a fund, if you will, of the 10 winners from the last 2 years of the index. And what we found was really significantly superior stock market performance. And that's what you see here. The red bar is the Simplicity portfolio, and then you've got the S&P, the Dow, the FTSE, and the DAX. And you'll see that the brands that are engaging with people in simpler ways, that have products that are easier to understand, that also embrace simplicity in how they operate themselves, perform significantly better, both on the high points of the market as well as the dips. So what we take away from this is simplicity is driving customer preference, which is going to sales, which is going to pricing power, and those internal efficiencies are going to profit margins, all of which are driving stock market performance. So 4%, 5%, 6%, 7%, it may not sound like a lot, but when you start to aggregate that across business sectors, we're talking about billions of dollars. In the United States alone, across these 9 categories, it's over $27 billion a year that companies are leaving on the table because consumers have said, we will pay more for electronics, we will pay more for a restaurant experience, for a retail experience, for utilities, telecoms. We also found that simplicity leads to loyalty. We're big fans of the Net Promoter Score. It's the ultimate in simplicity out there. And that, of course, boils down to one question. Would you recommend this brand, product, or service to a friend? And what the study showed is that 82% of people around the world are more likely to recommend a simpler brand. And in China, 91% of people will recommend a simpler brand. So what we're going to do right now is Brian's going to dive into some of the leaders and laggards.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the things that was interesting in the study is that we put a whole bunch of brands in there. So it was across 25 categories. As Howard said, it was in 7 countries, 6 regions, about 125 brands per region. We customized them to the regions, and then we looked at which ones are global, which ones are in 2 or more geographies. And if you see the ones that dominate that come to the top, some are not probably surprising to people, which in some ways is good because it means the study's based on some good data. But you see there's Google up there, Amazon, IKEA. Apple, interestingly, has done much better this year. Last year, especially in the US, it wasn't doing so well because of the issues with AT&T and the service. So I think one of the things that was interesting as marketers, we always think of Apple as this simple brand. However, when you think about everyone in the country, it's only really recently that people have gotten on the Apple bandwagon, if you will. Another brand that's interesting from a simplicity standpoint is Nokia. In the US, we don't really see them all that much, but in China and in India, they've really simplified the way people live by giving them mobile devices and enabling them to not have to go sort of 3 towns over to make a phone call. So something, the things that are more interesting even is who's not doing so well, because everyone likes to look at the losers also. So if you see here, there's insurance, car rental. Car rental does particularly badly. Social media is actually interesting. LinkedIn didn't do so well. Overall, actually, we asked some questions regarding technology, regarding social media. Social media, people do find is a bit of a mixed bag. We all sort of love it because we feel it's a great way to reach people and to get real-time information and data, as we've been seeing. However, for people who are using it, it's often a bit of a hassle in the sense that now I have to manage multiple identities. It's not just me. It's me on Facebook. It's me on LinkedIn. So we saw that having a real impact. And another brand that didn't do so well, Ryanair. I don't know how many of you have been in Europe, but they've actually sort of revolutionized, well, one of the brands that has revolutionized travel because they're so cheap. You can get plane tickets, allegedly, as you see up here, for a little under £10. However, the one issue, and that's why people don't like them from a simplicity standpoint, is you think you're buying it for £10, but if you actually use the bathroom on the plane, it goes up to £50. So that's one of the things really that you see from a simplicity standpoint is when you're promising something to your customers and to consumers, and then on the back end, that's not what you're delivering. It's not the $9.99. It's actually a whole bunch of added fees, and you can think of the same with car rental and insurance and others. That really does not do much from a customer loyalty as well as from a just simplicity standpoint. So in the US, and this was something that was interesting, when we fielded the study, Netflix was just in the middle. They'd announced their rate hike. They hadn't actually implemented it yet, and it was before the quick stir debacle. But they came up, as they had last year, as the simplest brand in the US. Of course, their stock was tanking just as we were sort of putting these things together. And we were thinking, oh, well, this is kind of strange. We're seeing this research that's showing that people love them. And then on the other hand, who are not obviously in this top 10, Groupon didn't do well at all. And we were seeing a lot of findings that were showing that Groupon, really people were finding that the promise was not being delivered on and that the deals weren't really there. And interestingly, at the time, again, when we were doing this, Groupon was having its fantastic IPO. Now, as things have progressed, you've seen sort of Netflix has bounced back, and it sort of showed that the way people were feeling is actually true. It's still the most seamless and best way of delivering entertainment. Groupon has actually had a lot of less repeat business and is not doing so well. So one of the things we wanted to look into in different industries, what is it about the experience? How can we find out a little more sort of deeper down into the touch points as to what's simple or not? So one thing in terms of technology that we thought was interesting is it showed, and we often forget about that these days because everyone's in love with social media and their devices, and all of us in the room are pretty sophisticated probably in terms of how we use technology, more so than at least the average person. And what we saw here is that really still computer and email is still very much the things that people find simplest. And as you see, even though tablets and the promise of tablet is this sort of added simplicity, removing the keyboard, and especially social media are not seen to be quite so simple for people. So even though we can often think that sort of the speed of adoption and the speed of change has increased dramatically, I think there still is this early adopter, middle adopter mechanic. It's maybe much faster than it used to be in terms of technology, but it's not like it's been removed entirely. And then another thing we wanted to look at was retail. Earlier, people actually, Mark from L'Oreal was speaking about the convergence of offline and online channels. And so we wanted to look at, well, what's simplest online and what's simplest offline, if anything, in-store any longer. And sure enough, it does show the price comparison and getting the best price. That's definitely much easier online. However, it doesn't mean that store is completely dead, because the ease of return process is still very much something that people see as much easier in store. And finding the highest quality also has a definite edge in store. So it's sort of interesting to compare, if you think about it, that product comparison, the whole sort of idea of price is much easier to see online, but quality is something that still is much easier for people to look at when they actually sort of see the physical object, if you will.
So what we thought we'd do is just wind up with a few observations about how does it really happen out there in the marketplace. What you're looking at here is what we call an unheralded touch point. It's actually a credit card agreement. And a couple years ago, Barack Obama was giving some speech and legitimately railing against a lot of financial institutions that were confusing their customers about the terms of credit card agreements. And he said, I don't know why there can't be a one-page agreement that you don't need a law degree to really understand what you're getting into. So we actually designed one. This is a Wall Street Journal ad. And basically this is from a major, one of the probably top 3 retail banks in the country. Their standard credit card agreement was 32 pages. And we took it to 1 page, it took several months, worked with a lot of attorneys, and basically laid out half a dozen of the key points. How do you use this card? What's the credit limit? How do you pay? What's the interest? What are the penalties? What are any additional fees? And how does dispute resolution work? And that was a tremendous example of simplifying something that would have enormous impact on relationships of these banks with customers. We have a number of clients in the financial services area. This freaked them out, but we have worked with a few and got their agreements down to 6 or 7 pages. John Hayes talked about the American Express brand being largely built on communities. And he talked about how they go about doing that. And that is, some of the things that he mentioned are really the how-tos of simplifying products, brands, experiences. And that is, anticipate the needs of your customers. Put yourselves in their position. Bring empathy to product development. Offer speed everywhere you can. And customize your products and services to the relationship, to the particular person's needs, wherever you can. And there, in doing so, you'll create simple, intuitive experiences. And Target is another great example of a company that's really differentiated themselves through simplicity. When you're dealing with a brand, the only surprise that you want is a pleasant surprise. Brian talked about dealing with car rental agencies or airlines where you think you understand what something's going to cost and you find out that's not the case. If you're managing a brand or creating a product and you find yourself apologizing for how complex or difficult or bureaucratic that product or service or experience is, the thing to do is to stop trying to explain it differently and take a look at the experience itself and redesign that experience, starting from ground zero to improve it, to make it much simpler, much more intuitive, and gain real differentiation and competitive advantage.